It was a gloomy, rainy afternoon, the kind of rain that comes slowly but doesn't seem to stop. The air was cold, and the busy market road was full of puddles, mud, and noise. People rushed to cover their goods with nylon. Umbrellas danced in every direction, feet shuffled through brown water. By the roadside, under a half-broken umbrella, sat an old man named Papa Godfrey. He wore a faded shirt and an old cap pulled down over his forehead. His sandals were wet, his hands folded on his lap as he waited for the rain to ease. He didn't complain. He just sat there quietly, watching people move, his tired eyes calm and steady. He looked like any other poor forgotten man, someone you could pass without a second glance. But there was something in his eyes, calm, watchful, like someone who had seen the world and was still trying to understand it. Then suddenly, a black SUV came from nowhere. It didn't slow down. It didn't care about the mud or the people nearby. The car screeched to a halt right in front of Papa Godfrey, nearly hitting his legs. The old man gasped, pulling his legs back just in time. The door flew open. From inside, a young man in a fitted designer shirt, expensive sneakers, and dark sunglasses stepped out. His voice was deep, sharp, and proud. It was Brian. He looked at the mud on his pristine bumper, then looked at the old man sitting close to it. "Get out of the way, old man. Why are you blocking the road like you own it?" Before Papa Godfrey could speak, Brian kicked the old man's wooden stool, nearly knocking him into the mud. "Useless people everywhere," Brian spat, looking down at him. "You sit here looking like a beggar. People like you belong in the village, not cluttering up the city." Papa Godfrey didn't fight back. He gripped his cane, his hands trembling. He looked up at the young man, his eyes wide. "Young man, I was just resting my legs." "Rest in your grave," Brian insulted him. "Next time I see you here, I'll have you arrested for loitering." He got back into his car, slammed the door, and the SUV sped off, tires spinning mud into the air. People around the market stopped. Some stared in shock. Others shook their heads. One woman shouted after the car, "No respect for elders?" Another man muttered, "What kind of human being is this?" Papa Godfrey didn't respond. He slowly bent to fix his stool, his fingers shaking. He looked down at his dusty trousers. Then he whispered to himself, "Just a little respect." That's all he needed to give. Suddenly, a calm voice broke through the crowd. "Baba, let me help you." A young man, dressed in a heavy-duty work apron, bent down beside Papa Godfrey. He had kind eyes, and his voice was deep but warm. He helped the old man steady the stool and dusted off his trousers with his own handkerchief. "I'm so sorry that happened to you, Baba," he said softly. Then he opened a small bag, pulled out a bottle of water, and handed it to Papa Godfrey. He even stood by him, shielding him from the wind. The old man looked at him for a long moment, his lips shaking, not from cold, but from something else, something deeper. "Thank you, my son," Papa Godfrey said quietly. "Thank you." The young man smiled. "It's nothing, Baba. No one deserves to be treated like that." As the rain slowed to a drizzle, the crowd slowly moved on. Papa Godfrey sat still on the low stool. His heart was full, not with shame, but with something warmer, something he hadn't felt in a long time. The young man beside him, the one who had helped him, was now checking if he was hurt. "Thank you, my son," Papa Godfrey said again, his voice low but steady. The boy smiled, soft and sincere. "You don't talk to elders like that," he replied. "That man was wrong, completely wrong." Papa Godfrey looked at him closely. The boy was clean-shaven, his work apron a little stained with dust and grease. He wore simple sneakers, and his hair was cut low, but his eyes were full of light. "What's your name, son?" the old man asked. "Anthony," he said cheerfully. "I work just down the road, at Iron City Hardware." He pointed across the street. "I usually help customers with heavy lifting." Papa Godfrey nodded slowly. "You're kind, Anthony. You have a good heart." Anthony looked at the older man's damp shirt. "Baba," he said gently, "would you let me buy you a warm cup of tea? There's a small shop behind our store. It's nothing fancy, but it will warm you up." Papa Godfrey's eyes widened, touched by the offer. He quickly shook his head. "Ah, no, my son, don't worry yourself. You've already done more than enough. I'll be fine." But Anthony wasn't done. He reached into his pocket and brought out a few folded Naira notes. "Take this," he said. "Just for a taxi home. Please." Papa Godfrey looked at the money, his hand frozen mid-air. "I can't take that. No, please keep it." But Anthony gently placed the money in his hand, closing the old man's fingers around it. "Baba, let me do this for you. And if you're ever around this side again," he pointed again at the hardware store, "please come in and see me. I'm always there. You're not alone, Baba. Okay?" Papa Godfrey blinked back sudden tears. He wanted to say more, but his throat was tight with emotion. He nodded slowly. "See you again, Baba," Anthony said with a smile, before rushing back across the road, dodging the puddles. Papa Godfrey watched him go, the way he greeted a passing customer, the way he helped a woman carry a heavy bucket of paint, and his heart grew soft and heavy at the same time. He looked down at the now crumpled money in his hand. It wasn't the money that moved him. It was the heart behind it. He looked up at the sky, grey but clearing, and whispered quietly to herself, "If only I could have a son-in-law like that, I would be very grateful to God." He stood still for a moment, his eyes fixed on the hardware store where Anthony had disappeared. A part of his heart felt strangely full. He slowly turned to leave, still clutching the small money Anthony had insisted he take. As he walked away from the market road, a black SUV turned the corner, cutting through the street like a shark through water. Inside the car, the same man who had kicked his stool earlier, Brian, was leaning back in his seat, cool, arrogant, and listening to loud music. A few hours later, Brian was sitting in a barber shop, one of the most expensive places in the city. The air smelled of cologne and aftershave. A football match played on a large TV screen. Around him, other rich young men laughed, argued about the game, and checked their phones. Brian checked his reflection in the mirror, admiring his fresh haircut. Click. He took a selfie and typed a caption quickly before posting, "Kings don't compete with peasants. Boss moves." Within minutes, the likes started pouring in. "Too fresh. Step on their necks. Big boy." Brian smiled and tossed his phone onto the counter. 2 years ago, this life was only a dream. He had once been a mechanic's apprentice, wore the same grease-stained shirt every day. He had grown up in a one-room apartment with 5 siblings. But things changed the day he modeled a suit for a local tailor. A famous fashion blog reposted his picture, and his followers exploded overnight. Now he was a full-blown influencer and model, known for his luxury lifestyle, confidence, and unapologetic posts. Brands paid him well, people followed his every move. He had a driver, a stylist, and an assistant. Life was good. But deep inside, Brian still heard the voice of poverty. He remembered hunger, shame, people looking down on him. And he swore to himself every single day, "I know the taste of poverty, and I'll never go back." That's why he hated seeing poor people. To him, they were reminders of where he came from, a place he wanted to erase, not just escape, but bury completely. He turned to his friend, Mike, who was watching the football game. "You're looking sharp today, B. What's the secret?" Brian leaned back in the barber's chair and smirked. "Catherine." Mike's eyebrows rose. "Wait, Catherine Okoye, the billionaire CEO Catherine?" Brian nodded proudly. "Yes, and she's going to say yes soon." "Wow," Mike breathed. "You hit the jackpot, man. Every guy in this city wants her." Brian laughed lightly. "Of course they do, but she chose me. I'm the full package, looks, style, and brand." Mike smiled. "Well, don't lose her." Brian's eyes gleamed. "I won't. She knows I'm her level." He leaned back again, but what he didn't know was the careless act at the muddy roadside. It hadn't been forgotten. Some people saw, and some people remember. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, inside a quiet corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows, Catherine Okoye was sitting behind her desk, reading through project reports. She wasn't a woman of many words. Her voice was calm, her mind sharp, and her presence powerful, not because she shouted, but because she didn't need to. The room shifted when she entered. People listened when she spoke. Yet for all her success, she hated noise, she hated show-offs. That's what made her different. As the CEO of Okoye Innovations, a fast-growing tech company known for groundbreaking apps and digital solutions, Catherine was one of the most talked-about bachelorettes in the country. Still, she didn't care much for the spotlight. Her heart was quiet and often lonely. There was a knock on the glass door. Her assistant stepped in. "Mom, your 4 o'clock meeting has been moved to tomorrow." "All right," she said, barely lifting her eyes. "And your boyfriend called again." "Brian. He asked if you've confirmed dinner at the Ivy Lounge." Catherine looked up for a moment, then leaned back in her chair. "Tell him I'll be there." The assistant nodded and left. Catherine sighed and rubbed her temples. Brian. Handsome, confident, loud. Every time he walked into a room, heads turned. On paper, he was everything a woman like her should want. A public figure, stylish, ambitious. They had met at a gala almost a year ago, where she was hosting and he had been a guest of honor. He had approached her boldly, with a charming smile and his signature line, "The most powerful woman in the room deserves the most confident man." At first, she had been curious. He was different from the stiff businessman she'd met before, so sure of himself, so full of energy. It was refreshing, for a while. But as time passed, she began to notice things. He cared too much about appearance, about control, about class. He treated waiters like they were invisible. He spoke as though wealth made people more important than others. And though she hadn't said it aloud, a small voice inside her whispered, "This isn't what love is supposed to feel like." Still, she stayed. Maybe because it was easier than starting over. Maybe because everyone expected her to be with someone like him. She stood up and walked to the window. The sky outside was still cloudy from the afternoon rain. Somewhere far away, water was still dripping from market roofs. The evening breeze rolled gently through the quiet neighborhood as a yellow taxi pulled up in front of a large black gate. The compound behind it was massive. Tall fences, neat hedges, a security post by the side. It was the kind of house that made passers-by stop and stare. The taxi door opened slowly, and Papa Godfrey stepped out, holding a nylon bag with his wet cap inside. His shirt was still slightly damp from the rain, but he walked with quiet dignity. The 2 guards at the gate sprang up the moment they saw him. "Baba, Baba, you took taxi again?" the younger one asked nervously. "But Madam said you shouldn't be doing that again." "Oh." The older guard shook his head, clearly shaken. "Baba, at least call your driver next time. You scared us." Papa Godfrey smiled calmly. "I just needed some fresh air, that's all." Just then, a black car drove in through the side gate, and a man in uniform stepped out as personal driver. "Sir, you went out again without telling me," he said, rushing over to open the smaller gate for him. That was the moment it became clear. Papa Godfrey wasn't just anybody. He was the father of Catherine Okoye, the billionaire tech mogul. This quiet man in simple clothes, who had just been insulted and kicked by Brian earlier that day, lived in a mansion with staff, security, and a fleet of cars. But he preferred silence to show, simplicity to status, respect to riches. He walked through the open gate slowly, nodding to the guards as they bowed slightly. Inside, the mansion was peaceful. Wide hallways, polished floors, and family photos hanging gently on the walls. He placed his wet shirt out to dry near the kitchen window, humming softly to himself. His clothes were still damp, but his heart was full of the memory of a young man with kind eyes and gentle hands. Anthony. The name repeated in his mind like a quiet song. He sat down slowly in his favorite chair and rested his hands on his lap. The house was quiet, but not in a lonely way. It was the kind of quiet that helped him think. He looked up at a faded photo of his late wife, framed neatly above the old bookshelf. "Mama Catherine," he said softly. "Our girl has become a woman. She has everything now. except a good man by her side. A sigh escaped his lips. Catherine had always been strong, wise beyond her years, but he knew strength could still feel lonely. Her mother had died over 10 years ago, and though Catherine never said it out loud, the silence in the house had changed her. Now, he often wondered, what if I leave too? Who will she come home to? It was this fear, quiet but deep, that made him start watching people closely. Over the years, he had begun moving quietly through parts of the city, sometimes dressed as a simple pensioner, as an old market man, just to see the way people behaved when they thought no one important was watching. If a man can't show kindness to a stranger, he would tell herself, he isn't right for my daughter. That day at the market, when Brian's foot had kicked his stool and he was insulted like trash, Papa Godfrey had felt the sting, not just of the kick, but of disrespect. But then came Anthony. That boy hadn't hesitated. He didn't know who he was. He didn't ask for anything. He simply helped with his hands, his heart, and his eyes. Papa Godfrey had felt something stir inside him, a spark of hope. He leaned back now, the breeze tickling his arms. Anthony, he whispered, smiling. If I had a son like that, no, a son-in-law like that, I would thank God every day. He didn't know yet that Brian, the proud man from the SUV, was the same man his daughter was dating. But he knew one thing for sure. He wanted Catherine to meet Anthony. The challenge now was how. How would he bring them together without forcing it? How could he guide his daughter's heart, gently, in the direction of a man who had already passed a test he didn't even know he was taking? Papa Godfrey closed his eyes, thinking carefully. Somewhere out there, in a hardware store not far away, was a young man named Anthony, and something inside him said, this was only the beginning. The next morning, while the large halls of the Okoye mansion glowed in silence, and Papa Godfrey sat with coffee in hand, quietly thinking about how to find Anthony again. Just a few streets away, the buzz of morning business had begun. Inside a busy hardware store tucked beside the market road, Anthony was already at work. He stood behind the counter in his work apron, sorting out receipts and checking the supply list for the day. He was 27, handsome in a simple way. No flashy beard gang, no gold chains, just a neat haircut, clean clothes, and a calm presence that somehow made people feel at ease. His smile wasn't loud, but it was warm, and when he spoke, his voice carried a kind of peace that stuck with you. "Good morning, Madam Bisi," he greeted an older customer, helping her lift a bucket of white paint onto the counter. "You're early today." "You know me now," the woman laughed. "Before the sun comes out, I must finish shopping." Anthony smiled again, scanned the items, and packed everything carefully. The store, Iron City Hardware, was not the fanciest place, but it was well kept. Most of the customers from the neighborhood preferred it because of the friendly staff and honest prices, and most of them liked to come when Anthony was on duty. He was smart, hard-working, and always respectful to customers, colleagues, even delivery boys. The shopkeeper, Mr. Oho, a round-faced man in his 50s, often watched him with quiet admiration. "That boy has sense," he once told another staff member. "He does his work well, never complains, and respects himself." His colleagues, too, always spoke highly of him. "If I had a son like Anthony, I would sleep with 2 eyes closed," Mama Kemi, the cleaner, would often say. But what none of them knew, not even Mr. Oho knew, was that Anthony's name was once whispered in the richest homes of the city. He was none other than Anthony Williams, the only son of one of the wealthiest businessmen in the city, Chief Williams. He had grown up surrounded by gold gates, marble floors, and private tutors. But it never made him proud. Still, when he turned 24, everything changed. Women began to flock. Businessmen and politicians sent offers to his father. People smiled too much at him but never looked him in the eyes. Everyone saw his name, his wealth, his future, but nobody saw him. "I want real love," he had once told his mother. "Not someone who wants to marry my bank account." His mother had sighed. His father had dismissed it, but Anthony had made his choice. He left. He cut off his cards, packed a bag with simple clothes, and moved far from his old life into a quiet, everyday neighborhood where no one knew his face. There, he applied for work at a neighborhood hardware store, something his old friends would never imagine. And for the last 2 years, he had lived quietly, without guards, cars, or glam. It wasn't always easy, but it was real. Here, people greeted him as Anthony the shop boy. They smiled because of his kindness, not his last name. And in all the time he'd been there, no one ever asked about his past. He liked it that way. But now, things were beginning to shift. That older man from the market, the one he had helped the day before, had touched his heart deeply. He reminded me of my grandfather, Anthony whispered to himself as he arranged boxes of nails. Strong, but alone. He hadn't expected anything in return, but something about that man stayed with him. Little did he know that same man, Papa Godfrey, was already planning to find him again. And even more unexpected, soon someone new would walk into the shop. Someone who had no idea who Anthony really was. Meanwhile, inside, Papa Godfrey sat on the edge of the sofa, his hands wrapped around a warm cup of coffee. He was deep in thought, his mind still on the kind boy from the market, Anthony. Footsteps echoed softly in the hallway. Catherine walked in, dressed neatly in a dark blazer and trousers. She looked sharp, but her brows were slightly furrowed. "Papa," she said, standing in front of him, "why did you go out in a taxi again?" Papa Godfrey looked up slowly. "So even my driver reports me now?" he asked with a small smile. Catherine sighed and sat beside him. "It's not safe. You have cars, a driver. Why would you take a taxi through that kind of place?" He placed his cup on the table and folded his hands gently. "Catherine, there's something you need to understand. I don't go out to see danger. I go out to see people. I wear simple clothes, no watch, no name. And I watch how people behave when they think no one is watching." She looked confused. "For what, Papa?" "For you, my daughter." She frowned. "Me?" "Yes," he said softly. "You have everything. Wealth, power, respect. But one thing is still missing. A man who truly sees you. Not your money, not your company, just you. I want someone who can walk beside you with humility and heart. Not someone chasing your last name." Catherine rubbed her forehead. "Papa, this again. I've told you already. I have someone. I'm not a little girl anymore." He blinked. "Wow, really?" She nodded. "Yes. I'll introduce him to you soon, so please, no more matchmaking, no more tests." Papa Godfrey held her gaze. "If he is the one, if your heart is truly at peace with him, then I have no problem, my daughter. I just want to be sure you're choosing with your soul, not your eyes." Catherine stood, gently kissing his forehead. "Thank you, Papa, but trust me, I know what I'm doing." He smiled faintly, watching her walk out the door, briefcase in hand. But deep inside, his heart was not fully convinced. That evening, on her way home from a long day at the office, Catherine asked her driver to stop at the market junction. "Just want to grab a cold bottle of water." She got out and walked into a nearby corner shop, Iron City Hardware. The bell above the door jingled softly as she entered. Behind the counter stood a young man in a grey work apron, neatly dressed. He looked up and offered a gentle smile. "Good evening, ma'am. Welcome." Catherine nodded. "Just a bottle of water, please." He handed it to her from the small fridge by the counter and told her the price. As she paid, their fingers touched for a brief moment. He was polite, quiet, not overly chatty like some men were when they saw a woman in a nice suit or expensive shoes. His voice was calm, his energy peaceful. Something about him felt different. "Thank you," she said, already turning to leave. But as she stepped outside, she heard the soft patter of shoes behind her. "Ma'am, your change." She turned. He held out a small, folded note with both hands. "You forgot this," he said, a little shy, eyes avoiding hers respectfully. She smiled and took it. "Thank you. Most people wouldn't bother." He shrugged. "It's not mine. You worked for it." She stared at him a second longer than usual. There was nothing flashy about him. No arrogance, no smooth pickup lines. Just realness. "Have a good evening," he added, walking back inside. "You too," she replied softly. As she stepped back into the car, the driver asked, "Everything all right, ma'am?" Catherine nodded slowly, eyes still on the shop window. "Yeah, just interesting guy." She didn't know his name. He didn't know who she was. And neither of them knew that this simple meeting was about to change everything. The following morning, the sun was soft, casting a gentle glow over the market street. It was a quiet day, the kind Papa Godfrey liked best. The air was fresh, and the roads were drying up from the week's rain. He sat in the back seat of the car, dressed once again in his simple trousers and plain shirt, his cap worn low. His driver glanced at him through the rearview mirror. "Are you sure you don't want me to wait close by, sir?" "No, just park somewhere nearby. I won't be long," he replied. His eyes were focused ahead on a small green sign that read, "Iron City Hardware." As he stepped out and entered the shop, the little bell above the door rang gently. Behind the counter, Anthony looked up, and his face immediately lit up. "Baba, you came!" he exclaimed, hurrying from behind the counter. Papa Godfrey smiled warmly. "I told you I would, didn't I?" Anthony brought out a plastic chair and guided him to sit, treating him like his own grandfather. "You didn't have to come all this way. If you needed anything, I could bring it to you." "I didn't come to buy anything," Papa Godfrey said, chuckling. "I just wanted to see you. You remind me of someone dear." Anthony's chest warmed with the compliment. He bent slightly and spoke gently. "Baba, I've been thinking. If I can save for a few more months, I can help you set up a little table or kiosk behind the store, something small, maybe for newspapers or fruits. You can sit there and still earn something without stress." Papa Godfrey looked at him, deeply moved. "You want to do that for me?" "Yes, I may not have much, but it would make me happy." Papa Godfrey shook his head slowly, tears nearly gathering in his eyes. "My son, you don't even know me. And you don't even have much. Yet you want to give." Anthony hesitated. His heart beat faster. This was the moment. He almost said it, almost told the man everything. About who he really was. That he wasn't just a shop boy. That he could afford to build him not just a kiosk, but an entire store if he wanted to. But something held him back. His voice came out low. I'll explain everything next time. I promise." Papa Godfrey touched his hand gently. "You don't owe me anything, my son. Your heart has already spoken louder than money." Just then, the little bell above the door rang again. Before either of them could look up fully, a tall figure bumped into Papa Godfrey at the entrance. Brian. Head held high, designer jacket over one shoulder and his usual shop cologne floating around him. He stumbled slightly, then stepped back, his face twisting with disgust. "Oh, not you again," he snapped, dusting his sleeve dramatically. "You're still walking around cluttering up the place." Papa Godfrey stepped aside quietly, saying nothing. "I spent thousands on these sneakers today," Brian went on, "and now this old man has nearly ruined them with his dusty sandals." His voice was loud, rude, cruel. But he wasn't ready for what came next. Anthony had heard everything. He rushed out from behind the counter, his eyes blazing. "Excuse me," he said firmly. "You don't speak to him like that." Brian raised an eyebrow, then burst into laughter. "Oh, look, the shop boy has a voice. Of course losers stick together." Anthony stepped forward, his voice steady. "Being rich doesn't make you a man, and insulting the elderly doesn't make you strong. It makes you small." Brian rolled his eyes and adjusted his sunglasses. "Spare me the lecture, Pastor. You sell cement for a living. Don't talk to me about class." He turned and stormed off, shoes clicking on the pavement. The store fell silent again. Anthony turned to Papa Godfrey, his chest still rising and falling. I'm so sorry, Baba. You didn't deserve that. The old man smiled, eyes moist with emotion. No need to apologize, my son. You defended me. Again. I just think young men like that still have a lot to learn about how the world works. Anthony walked him to the door and watched as he disappeared down the road. And as Papa Godfrey entered his waiting car, he clutched his chest softly. If only she knew, he whispered. If only my daughter knew who this boy really is. That evening, the Okoye mansion glowed softly under the warm light of crystal chandeliers. The dining table was being carefully set, silverware polished, napkins folded neatly, and wine glasses standing like quiet guards around the plates. Everything was being prepared for what Catherine called a special dinner. In the living room, Papa Godfrey sat on his usual chair, sipping coffee quietly as Catherine walked in, checking her watch. Papa, she said calmly, I want to introduce you to someone. He raised his eyebrows, pretending not to expect it. Who is he? Brian, she replied. My boyfriend. I told you about him before. I want us to have a proper dinner together. The three of us. Papa Godfrey nodded slowly. All right then, let's meet him. A few hours later, at exactly 7 p.m., the black SUV pulled up in front of the mansion. Brian stepped out, shoes shining smartly on the pavement. He wore a fitted suit that looked expensive, a gold watch on his wrist, and his beard was trimmed to perfection. His smile was sharp with excitement. Tonight is the night, he whispered to himself, checking his teeth in the car's side mirror. She's finally going to say yes. He rang the bell and was led inside by a butler. Madam Catherine is waiting in the dining room, sir, the butler said. He walked in confidently, expecting candlelight and maybe a business proposition on the table. But what he saw made his feet freeze. Sitting calmly at the end of the long dining table, dressed simply in a clean shirt and trousers, was the last face he ever expected to see. The old beggar man he had kicked and insulted outside the market. Brian's eyes widened. His body stiffened. His mouth opened slightly, but nothing came out. Just then, Catherine entered the room, smiling. Papa, she said, motioning with her hand. Meet Brian, my boyfriend. Papa Godfrey rose slowly, his eyes cold but calm. Oh, we've met already, he said, his voice sharp as glass. Twice, in fact. Brian looked at Catherine in horror. What is he talking about? He stammered. Catherine turned, confused. Papa? Papa Godfrey stepped forward, eyes fixed on Brian. The first time we met, he was driving a black SUV. He nearly hit me. Then he kicked my stool and insulted me. He said, "People like you belong in the village." Brian's face turned pale. That's not, he started, reaching for a defense, but Papa Godfrey cut him off. The second time, he bumped into me at a hardware store, again, insults. He said I was cluttering the place, that I ruined his sneakers just by standing there. Catherine's smile disappeared. She stared at Brian, stunned. Brian? I didn't know he was your father, Brian blurted, forcing a weak laugh. I thought he was just, it was a misunderstanding. Papa Godfrey folded his arms slowly. Exactly. You didn't know. That's the point. But I'm sorry now, Brian said quickly, blinking fast. I mean it. Papa Godfrey shook his head, his voice firm. True character is shown when no one is watching. You had your chance, twice. Silence filled the room. Catherine stared at Brian, the weight of disappointment sinking in. I knew you were materialistic and arrogant, but I never knew you were this cruel, she said quietly. I should never have brought you here. Brian's lips quivered. Catherine, please. She took a deep breath and stepped back. I can't build a life with a man who has no respect for the people around me, or people in general just because they are poor. And I certainly cannot marry someone who wears success on the outside but carries pride like poison. Brian swallowed hard. Panic gathered in his eyes, but Catherine was already turning away. It's over, she said softly. You can go. He stood frozen for a moment, his carefully crafted image now shadowed by shame. Then slowly, he turned and walked toward the door, footsteps silent this time. Papa Godfrey sat back down, letting out a deep, quiet sigh. Catherine joined him, her face heavy.
Papa, I'm sorry. He reached over and held her hand. Don't be. Sometimes, heartbreak is what clears the road for something real. Moments later, the grand front door of the Okoye mansion closed with a soft but final thud. Brian was gone. The air inside the house shifted. Lighter now, clearer.
The scent of heavy cologne faded as silence returned. Catherine remained standing in the hallway, her arms crossed, her heart heavy. She turned and walked slowly back into the sitting room, where Papa Godfrey sat waiting. His expression was calm, but there was a softness in his eyes. Not pride, not, "I told you so," just understanding.
She lowered herself onto the couch beside him and let out a long sigh. Papa, I'm sorry. He turned his head toward her, his face gentle. For what, my daughter? For almost bringing the wrong person into this family. I didn't know he treated people like that. I swear I didn't. Papa Godfrey reached for her hand and gave it a soft squeeze. You didn't do anything wrong by believing in someone, Catherine, but I'm proud of you for letting go when the truth came out. Catherine looked at him. It still hurts, though. Of course it does, he nodded, but pain that teaches is never wasted. He sat up straighter, his voice quiet but firm.
Catherine, respect should not be given to someone simply because they're rich, famous, or well-dressed. It should be earned by how they treat others, especially those who have nothing to offer them. She nodded slowly, reflecting on his words. Then he smiled. But I didn't call you back here just to speak about him. She looked at him curiously. Oh? He chuckled softly. I want to introduce you to someone. Catherine's eyebrows lifted slightly, but he raised a hand before she could protest. No matchmaking, I promise. Nothing serious, just a young man I met recently. He helped me when he didn't know who I was. He showed me kindness even when I looked like I had nothing. That's not common these days. She smiled faintly, remembering the things her father had always taught her growing up. You really like him? I respect him, Papa Godfrey said. He has a good heart. And there's something peaceful about his presence, like fresh breeze after heavy rain. I thought maybe you could meet him. Even just as friends. Catherine leaned back on the sofa thinking. Papa, you know I don't want you picking men for me. He laughed. I'm not picking. I'm only suggesting you open your eyes where it matters. She laughed softly too, then nodded. All right, I'll make time. Maybe next weekend? That's fine, he smiled. I'll let him know. She stood and bent to kiss his forehead. Thanks for always looking out for me, Papa. Even when I don't deserve it. He touched her cheek. You always deserve love, Catherine. Just make sure whoever gives it understands what it means. As she walked off toward her study, neither of them knew she had already met the boy he was talking about. The same boy who gave her back her forgotten change. The one with quiet eyes and steady hands. The next afternoon, the bell above the door at Iron City Hardware jingled softly. Anthony, restocking paint cans behind the counter, looked up and blinked in surprise but not displeasure. Catherine stepped in, dressed simply in a plain white shirt and jeans. There was no driver, no wristwatch gleaming with diamonds, just her, tired eyes, a gentle smile. Back again? He asked warmly. Apparently I'm very bad at remembering to buy water in bulk, she replied with a soft chuckle. He smiled and handed her a cold bottle before she even asked. Something about Anthony's presence had a way of calming her, like walking into a place where the world stopped spinning so fast. His kindness wasn't loud, but it was steady. And over the past week, Catherine found herself returning again and again, just to see him. She never told him who she was, only that she was Catherine, simply Catherine. She didn't tell him her last name or her wealth, and he never asked. And Anthony?
He didn't reveal anything either. He didn't speak of the family estates or his father's business empire. He didn't explain why a man with the poise of a diplomat was selling cement and tools in a small neighborhood store. They simply talked. At first, it was small things. The weather, funny customers, the best bread in the area, then slowly more. One evening, after his shift ended, Catherine waited outside, leaning casually by the entrance. "You walk home?" she asked.
"Most days," he said. "Helps me think. Can I walk with you?" He hesitated a moment, then nodded. And that walk turned into many walks. They spoke about life, how noisy the world could be, how real peace felt rare, how not all that glitters is gold. Catherine found herself opening up in ways she hadn't with anyone, not even Brian, not her colleagues, not even fully with her father. Sometimes, she confessed one night, you meet someone who checks all the boxes, looks, ambition, reputation. But their heart, it's empty, cold. Anthony looked at her, listening, never judging. And other times, she continued, you meet someone who makes you feel calm just by being near them. You feel like you've come home. His cheeks flushed gently at her words, but he kept walking. She noticed the way he didn't brag or try to impress her, yet somehow everything about him was impressive. The way he listened, the way he spoke, the way his quietness had more weight than any loud room she'd ever been in. And though Catherine didn't say it out loud yet, she was beginning to know. She was falling for him. But still, a part of her hesitated. What if I'm wrong again? What if I'm just caught in the feeling like I was with Brian? But something deeper, quieter whispered back, no, this is different. He's different. His class was the kind that didn't need to shout. His worth wasn't just on the outside, it lived in his choices. Meanwhile, Anthony was facing his own storm. That night, after returning to his small apartment, his phone rang. It was his mother's number, the familiar ringtone bringing back 1,000 memories.
Anthony, his mother's voice said gently, you promised. 2 years. It's time. Anthony sat on the edge of his bed, his heart suddenly tight. I know, Mom, he said softly. I need a little more time. Your father is planning a welcome dinner, his mother said. And people are beginning to ask questions.
You're not a boy anymore. You need to take your place. There are good women here, real women. We want to see you happy. Anthony's throat tightened. He looked out the window, the same road he and Catherine had walked just hours ago. I'll come soon, he whispered. I promise. After the call ended, he sat in silence. He had always planned to return home after 2 years. That was the agreement. But now, there was Catherine. The friend who asked nothing of him, who never looked at his wallet or his background, who spoke with honesty and listened with her eyes, who made him laugh when he was tired and think deeply when he was restless. He stared at the ceiling. The following morning, a gentle breeze rustled through the market street as Anthony stepped out during his short break. He was restocking the tool shelf when he noticed a familiar figure at the door, dressed simply as always, with a calm grace and kind eyes. Papa Godfrey. Baba, Anthony said, pleasantly surprised, wiping his hands on his apron. You came again? Yes, my son, Papa Godfrey smiled. I wanted to see you, and ask for a little favor. Anthony stepped aside to let him in. Anything, Baba? Papa Godfrey paused, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, neatly folded piece of paper. It was a handwritten note with an address and time. I'd like you to visit me, he said softly. At my home. Nothing serious, I just want you to meet someone. Anthony blinked in surprise, then smiled. Of course. I'll come on my day off. Thank you, Papa Godfrey said, squeezing his hand gently. I look forward to it. A few days later, the cab pulled up to a long, beautiful driveway lined with flowering trees and trimmed hedges. Anthony's eyes widened as he stepped out. In his mind, he'd expected a small flat or maybe a bungalow on a quiet street. But this was a mansion, elegant, quiet, grand. much like his own family house. He looked at the paper in his hand again, then at the tall black gates and the security post. This can't be right, he whispered to himself. Still, he walked forward. The guard checked the name on the paper and nodded respectfully. "You're expected," he said, waving him in. His heart beat faster as he stepped through the gate. The compound was breathtaking. He adjusted his shirt, suddenly feeling nervous. Then the front door opened, and there she was, Catherine. Wearing a simple grey dress, standing tall with a mix of surprise and something else in her eyes. A spark. Anthony stood frozen. "You?" She stepped forward, a stunned smile forming slowly. "You're the one Papa invited?" He nodded slowly, still stunned. "You live here?" She chuckled, rubbing her arm. "Yes, this is my home." He blinked, then laughed softly. "And here I was thinking you were just a really humble lady who liked bottled water a lot." "I do," she grinned. "But now you know I'm also the girl who forgets change just to keep coming back." He blushed lightly. "Come in," she said gently. As he entered the grand house, Papa Godfrey came down the stairs, already beaming. "Ah, you've met her," he said, pretending not to notice the surprise still on Anthony's face. "Yes, Baba," Anthony smiled. "Turns out, we already knew each other." Dinner was light, warm, and filled with laughter. But all through the meal, Papa Godfrey noticed something. The way Catherine stole glances at Anthony. The way she leaned slightly closer when he spoke. The way her smile softened every time their eyes met. After dessert, Papa Godfrey stood and gave them space. Later, he invited Anthony for a quiet chat in the garden. They sat under a shaded tree, and Papa Godfrey turned to him gently. "My son, I am glad you came, and even more glad you've met my daughter." Anthony sighed, folding his hands nervously in his lap. "Yes, Baba. I am happy I came around too. Seeing all this, knowing who you really are, I think it's time you knew who I really am too." He took a deep breath. "My name is Anthony Williams. I'm the son of Chief Williams. My father runs one of the biggest firms in the country, and my mother is a diplomat." Papa Godfrey blinked but didn't speak yet. "I left home almost 2 years ago. I was tired of being told who to marry, tired of people pretending to like me for who I wasn't. I wanted something real, peace, purpose, so I came here, left my identity behind and took a simple job to live like a regular person." Papa Godfrey looked at him for a long moment. Then he smiled warmly. "So I see. I wasn't the only one with a secret." Anthony laughed softly, the tension easing. "Seems we both had reasons to hide, Baba." Papa Godfrey touched his hand. "But the truth always finds its way out, and so does love." They sat in silence for a while, a shared understanding settling between them, not just as men but as fathers, sons, seekers of truth, and keepers of powerful secrets. That night, the moon hung quietly over the Okoye mansion, silver light pouring through Catherine's window as she sat in her study, lost in thought. "Anthony." She whispered his name under her breath like a secret prayer. It's been 3 days since the quiet dinner at the mansion. 3 days since the day she discovered he was the same kind-hearted boy who had always stood up for her father, but she still couldn't get him off her mind. How did I meet him? Not once, but twice. First as the boy who handed her her forgotten change, then as the man who had comforted her father without knowing who he was. There was no pretending anymore. Catherine was in love. It wasn't just his looks, though he was handsome. It wasn't even his kindness, though it pulled her in like gravity. It was his essence, quiet, grounded, deep. I have to tell him, she thought. He has to know how I feel. At that same moment across town, Anthony sat in his small apartment, staring at his reflection in the mirror. She's not just a kind stranger. She's Catherine Okoye, the billionaire, the daughter of Papa Godfrey, a man he respected deeply. And yet she hadn't treated him differently. She'd never once acted entitled or arrogant, and that made his heart ache more.
She deserves the truth, he whispered to himself. She has to know who I really am before this goes any further. But neither of them knew. A storm was already brewing. Meanwhile, in a high-rise apartment across the city, Brian paced angrily in expensive shoes he no longer felt strong in. His flawless image was cracking. His influencer posts were getting fewer likes. And Catherine? She wasn't answering his calls. He had been calling, texting, even showing up at places they used to visit. Finally, after days of silence, his phone rang. Catherine. He answered before the first ring could even finish. Catherine, thank God I've been trying to... Brian, she said calmly but firmly. This has to stop. Please, just let me explain. I'm not angry anymore, but we're over, really over, it's done. Click. The call ended. He froze. His chest rose and fell quickly, rage and panic rushing through his veins. How dare she? How dare she throw me away like that? For what? Just because I spoke harshly to an old man? Is it my fault he decided to look poor? Why couldn't he just show up classy and rich? Later that day, while scrolling through an influencer's post about socialites in the city, Brian saw it, a blurry picture of Catherine and a guy walking side by side outside a cafe. His heart dropped. That guy. He zoomed in. The same face from the hardware store, the one who had defended that old beggar man. No, he wasn't a beggar. He turned out to be Catherine's dad. Him again? He hissed aloud. What is she doing with that shop boy? Is she with him just because he defended her father? His mind started to spiral. The fame was fading. Brands had started moving on to younger, fresher faces. But if he could become Mr. Okoye, he'd be set for life. Power, money, status. No, he whispered, pacing again. I won't let that low-class nobody steal my future. His mind twisted into dark resolve. He has to go. He began pacing faster, eyes wild, heart burning. If that boy disappears, Catherine will come back. Her father will have no choice either. He picked up his phone and made a call. A shady voice on the other end answered. I need something done. Quietly. Back in the Okoye mansion, Papa Godfrey was watching the night sky when Catherine came outside. Papa, she said. Yes, my daughter? I've made up my mind. He turned to her. About what? Anthony. I want to tell him how I feel, and I want to know how he feels about me. Papa Godfrey smiled gently. I think you should too. I don't want you to lose someone like that. Such a jewel is hard to find. Catherine smiled faintly, hopeful, but unaware of the shadow that was silently creeping toward the man she was falling in love with. The morning sun rose gently over the city, spreading golden light across rooftops and rustling trees. Inside the Okoye mansion, Catherine stood by her bedroom window, phone in hand, heart quietly racing. Today was the day. She had made up her mind the night before, after the talk with her father, after all the signs, after the way her soul felt lighter around Anthony. He has to know how I feel, and I need to know how he feels too. She tapped her phone screen and typed, Hey, Anthony, I was wondering, would you like to have dinner with me tonight? Just the two of us. Nothing fancy. Just us. I'd really love to see you. Not even 2 minutes later, his reply came in. I'd like that. I was hoping to talk to you too. Catherine smiled to herself, a calm peace washing over her. But peace can be a fragile thing. And that morning, while Anthony ironed his simple shirt for the evening and packed away his apron from the store, a car had parked quietly across the street from his apartment. Inside sat a man in a black cap, pretending to scroll his phone, but his eyes never left the door. And not far from him, behind dark sunglasses and a scarf wrapped slightly around his face, sat Brian, watching too. He thinks he's won, Brian whispered bitterly. Let's see if he can win from the ashes. A few hours later, at the Williams family mansion, Anthony's parents were having tea in the garden when their trusted bodyguard Christopher burst in, breathing hard. Sir, madam. What is it? Chief Williams asked, already standing. Anthony, Something's happened. I was watching as usual from across the road. He didn't return home after his shift. Some men grabbed him near the corner of the street. I tried to follow, but I lost them." "What?" his mother screamed, standing so quickly the chair fell over. "I called the station immediately, but there's no news yet. No ransom, no calls, no demands, nothing." His father's face turned pale. "Put out a reward, immediately. 500 million for his safe return. No questions asked." "Yes, sir." But deep inside, they were terrified. This wasn't a simple kidnapping. Anthony was their only son. And someone had taken him without a trace. Back at her office, Catherine stared at her phone, puzzled. Anthony hadn't replied to her follow-up message about the dinner location. Strange, she thought. He always replies quickly. She tried calling. No answer. Tried again. Still nothing. A nervous chill crept into her chest. Maybe his phone's dead or he's busy. But the uneasy feeling only grew stronger. Then her phone buzzed suddenly. It was a forwarded article link from her personal assistant. She clicked on it lazily while sipping her coffee, and froze. Breaking. Chief Williams offers 500 million for safe return of missing son, Anthony Williams. Below the headline was a photo of the boy who had been haunting her thoughts for weeks. Anthony. Her Anthony. The caption read, "Chief Williams, one of Nigeria's wealthiest businessmen, is offering a reward for any information leading to the safe return of his only son, Anthony Williams, who went missing earlier today from his apartment." Catherine nearly dropped her phone. Anthony. Williams? Her thoughts spun wildly. He never told me. He's Chief Williams' son. He is a billionaire himself, even richer than she is. And yet, he had worked in a hardware store, walked home, laughed with her under streetlights. He never used his name, never played the rich card, never even hinted. Her heart swelled with both awe and panic. He's missing. And she must find him now, no matter what it took. Just as she turned to grab her keys and run out the office door, racing towards the parking lot in panic, a voice called behind her. "Madam Catherine, ma'am!" She turned. An elderly man, one of the old traders who sold fruit across the street from the hardware store, was waving and rushing toward her. "You know that fine boy you always come to see at the store?" the man panted. "Yes, Anthony," Catherine asked quickly. Yes. I saw him earlier today, but something not good happened." "What do you mean?" "Some men pushed him into a black car by the corner road near his house. I see it with my 2 eyes. They took him to that old warehouse near the railway line. You know the place that always looks abandoned?" Catherine's chest tightened. Yes, I know it. Go on." "They carried kerosene or fuel inside. I think they want to burn the place, burn him inside." Catherine's eyes widened in horror. "What? Did you call the reward line?" "No," the man interrupted, shaking his head. "He helped me once when my wife was sick. He bought all my fruits without asking price and even gave me extra to feed the kids. He took me to the chemist. I don't need money. I just want to see him safe. Go now, before it's too late." Catherine didn't wait another second. Thank you so much." She jumped into her car and sped off like her life depended on it, because someone else's life did. The roads blurred. Her heart pounded. Her hands shook as she called the police, shouting out the warehouse location. But even if they came late, she wasn't waiting. Inside the warehouse, Anthony lay tied to a chair, his mouth gagged, heart racing in fear. Darkness surrounded him. And in the shadows he heard the clink of a bottle. Then a voice he would never forget. "Goodbye, little hardware boy." Brian. He lit a match and smiled. Smoke curled into the dusky sky as Catherine's car screeched to a halt just outside the crumbling warehouse near the railway line. The scent of burning fuel hit her immediately, sharp, toxic, terrifying. "Anthony!" she shouted, sprinting through the rusty doors. Inside, flames licked the wooden crates stacked against the far walls. The heat was rising fast. Then, through the smoke, she saw him. Tied to a chair, eyes wide with fear, the fire only meters away. "Anthony!" she yelled again. His muffled cry was weak,
but it was enough. Without a second thought, Catherine lunged forward. A beam cracked overhead. Sparks fell dangerously close, but she didn't stop. Her hands worked quickly, pulling at the ropes, freeing his arms, then his legs. He was coughing hard, his eyes filled with tears, not just from the smoke, but the sight of her. "You came," he whispered hoarsely. "I'll always come," she said, helping him up. They barely made it out before the fire surged higher behind them. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance, the police and fire services finally arriving. Catherine helped Anthony sit on the grass just beyond the building. Her hands trembled, not from exhaustion, but from everything that had just happened. She looked at him, his face ash-streaked, his shirt torn, but still the most handsome thing she had ever seen. "I thought I lost you," she said softly. "You almost did," he whispered, his voice shaking. They sat there for a moment, side by side, in the cooling night. And then the silence broke. "Catherine, my name is Anthony Williams. I'm not a hardware boy. I'm the son of Chief Williams." She smiled, gently brushing soot off his cheek. "I know. I found out today, from the news." "I wanted to tell you," he said, "but I was scared. I've lived so long hiding who I am, afraid people would only see the wealth, not the person." "Anthony," Catherine interrupted, voice steady. "I saw the person from the very beginning. The boy who wiped mud off a stranger's face. The one who listened when I talked. The one who smiled at the world even when it wasn't kind to him." He blinked, stunned by her sincerity. "And I'm not just an ordinary woman either," she added quietly. "I'm Catherine Okoye, your woman." They both laughed softly, the irony almost magical. No more masks, no more guessing, no more hiding. "So what now?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Now," Catherine said, taking his hand, "we go home." Later that week, Anthony stood at the entrance of his family's estate, holding Catherine's hand tightly. His parents, Chief and Mrs. Williams, came out to receive them, already informed by the bodyguards and relieved beyond words to have their son home. When they saw Catherine, the woman who had saved his life, they were moved. "You have our gratitude," his father said, shaking Catherine's hand firmly. "But more than that, our respect." His mother embraced Anthony tightly, whispering, "I see it in your eyes. This is the one." Anthony smiled. "Yes, Mom. This is the one." Later that day, a public statement was released, not just announcing Anthony's safe return, but introducing Catherine and Anthony's relationship to the world. Photos of them together surfaced, Catherine with her arm around him, Anthony glowing beside her. The sun rose brightly over the city as social media buzzed with a headline that sent waves through every corner of the internet. Billionaire heir Anthony Williams engaged to Catherine Okoye, from humble beginnings to true love. In a quiet hardware store tucked near the market, Anthony's former co-workers huddled around a small TV screen behind the counter, mouths dropped open, eyes widened. "Wait, our Anthony. That same boy who used to stack the paint cans every morning. He's a billionaire heir?" The shopkeeper, Mr. Oho, shook his head with a grin. "He came here every day, wore the same neat clothes, smiled at everyone, never showed pride. And he was that rich all along?" "We thought he was just one of us," one of the younger staff members said. "That's exactly who he was," Mr. Oho replied. "Rich or not, his heart was gold." Meanwhile, in a high-rise apartment far across the city, Brian sat in silence. His phone buzzed again and again with updates. He didn't want to see pictures of Catherine and Anthony laughing, hugging, glowing in the spotlight. Comments flooded in. "Power couple goals. He's so graceful and real, I love him. This is the kind of love money can't buy." Brian's hands trembled as he shut the phone off. How do you fight a billionaire heir who's also kind, humble, and now loved by the whole country? You don't. You lose. Just then a knock. 3 firm knocks on his door. He opened it, only to be met by 2 police officers. "Mr. Brian Argue," one said, showing a warrant. "You're under arrest for kidnapping and attempted murder." You have the right to remain silent.
What?
No, wait, this is a mistake. We have evidence, the officer interrupted. Voice recordings, messages, and witness testimony, courtesy of Miss Catherine Okoye's private investigation team. Brian's legs gave way as he was handcuffed and led away, his empire of selfies, sponsors, and spotlight crumbling behind him. Weeks later, under the golden canopy of a luxurious but peaceful garden, Catherine stood at the altar, waiting. She smiled as she watched Anthony walk towards her in a simple but elegant suit, his presence radiant, his smile soft but strong. After the vows were exchanged and the kiss sealed their love, the reception lit up with joy and laughter. Papa Godfrey stood to give a toast, his voice rich with emotion. "Love is not built on titles or class," he said, raising his glass. "It's built on kindness, on respect and truth." Anthony's parents smiled proudly, holding hands as they watched their son finally find peace and love. Later, the market bustled with activity, just like always. Anthony, now dressed in a modest shirt and jeans, walked through the familiar street with a soft smile on his face. At one corner, a young man dropped his crate, scattering oranges across the ground. Before anyone could move, Anthony bent down, picking them up gently. "Let me help you," he said kindly. The young man looked up, stunned. You're the man from the TV, the one who just married that rich woman." Anthony only smiled. "Yes, but today I'm just Anthony." The young man smiled too, and together they packed the oranges back in the crate. Kindness is the only luxury that never fades. Respect should never be reserved for the rich. It defines who we are when no one's watching. Be kind even when no one is watching. Don't let money make you proud. Real love comes when you stop pretending. Life will always test your heart. What it reveals is who you truly are. Thank you for following this journey of humility, heart, and healing.